Delighted to introduce Dr. Stern and Dr. Becker. And the plan for the talk is from the chair seat, what makes a successful residency program director? Dr. Stern and Becker will discuss what makes for an ideal program director from the perspective of the chair of the department. Specific suggestions for how PDs can make life easier or harder for the chair will be covered, along with the range of expectations and actions that chairs seek when looking to hire a PD. They're going to touch on things like communication, alignment of goals, the importance of institutional relationships, the PD as an advocate, and concepts of effective leadership. And to introduce our two speakers, Dr. Becker, my boss, is the chair and professor of emergency medicine at the Hofstra Northwell School of Medicine at North Shore and LIJ. He is someone who is known to do balance basically three huge plates. He does very successful bench research. He has been involved in using a lot of innovative techniques to bring forward the use of more effective CPR, and his interest in resuscitation also extends to lab work, where he is doing work with mitochondria and essentially, as we tease him, kind of making the next zombie apocalypse. He previously founded major research centers at the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Chicago. He is an elected member of the National Academy of Medicine, led an IOM report on cardiac arrest, along with the American Heart Association CPR guidelines. Our co-presenter is Dr. Stern, hailing from the other side of the country at the University of Washington in Seattle. She has run the department there for the last 12 years. She has essentially an equally remarkably research background, also doing a research fellowship in resuscitation science at University of Cincinnati. And then moving on to the University of Michigan, she was looking at alternative novel resuscitation strategies in the very early period following traumatic hemorrhage shock, and also has an interest in bench work that has involved polytrauma models of TBI and uncontrolled hemorrhage in an animal lab. She has modeled for others who other laboratories have since adopted or used this model as a framework for investigation. She spent several months as a visiting professor at the Naval Medical Research Center in Maryland, and during that time assisted their research team in the development of a novel model, again for TBI and blunt liver trauma, which they continue to use. She previously at Michigan was the Associate Chair for Education and Chair of the University of Michigan Institutional Animal Use and Care Committee, and is, as I said, now at University of Washington in Seattle. I want to thank you both enormously for coming to join our party today, and we are super excited to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you. Actually, one last thing. Our speakers would like this to be as interactive as possible. That includes if you want to have questions at the time when they're speaking, they are welcoming those questions to be brought forward. There's also a chat, as most of you know, on the side, and I will field the questions for the chat and bring them into the conversation. So feel free to type whatever you want there. So thanks so much.
Thank you. So thank you. So let me just introduce for 1 minute and also get to introduce Dr. Stern for a moment, because I cannot tell you how happy I am to be able to do this with Dr. Stern. When Dr. Howie asked me to, give some thoughts on this, first of all, I was really excited because I think it's a great topic, and I couldn't think of anyone better than Dr. Stern to do this with. She and I have written grants together, collaborated, commiserated, been turned down on grants together. We've done just about everything for so many years. And Sue was a leader in really sort of thinking like boldly about hemorrhagic shock and things like that. So Sue, just lead us off here and let's move on in. And I do want to encourage people to feel like, feel free to put a question or interrupt if something's not clear, because the more interactive this is, the more fun we will all have. So Sue, please lead us off.
Thanks, Lance. And everything you just heard about me is not true. And everything you heard about Lance is true. So with that, I'm going to move on. And I just want to thank Marianne Howie and Cord Connects for the opportunity for Lance and I to do this, and in particular, Lance for pulling me in. I think we hope this is going to be fun. And as Lance said, interactive. So, the goals of today, we're going to talk as shown on the slide, what makes a successful residency program director. And just remember, this is from the chair's perspective. I'm not really telling, we're not going to get into some of the nitty gritty that you may be expecting. Let me see if I can advance these slides effectively. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So what we are going to discuss, what we're not going to discuss today is we're not going to focus on the mechanics of being a program director. We're not going to talk to you about how to implement the RRC rules. You are all already experts on that front, and I am not one to tell you about that. We're not going to focus on the principles of curricular development and evaluation, feedback. You guys grasp that, I'm sure. It's a really important part of your job. We're not going to focus on methodology. So what are we going to focus on? What's left? Well, we're actually going to talk a lot about some general principles of leadership, but how they may be more specific to the program director. And those include alignment and clear communication. We'll touch on topics of the importance of institutional relationships, the program director as an advocate, but also as again, a cultivator of relationships, some concepts of effective leadership, and the role of the program director as a coach, a model, and as a disciplinarian. So with that, I'm going to go on and we're going to jump right in. And again, feel free to interrupt as you see fit. Perhaps one of the most important aspects from the chair's perspective, again, being successful as a program director, but really helping to make your whole department successful, is that of a good partnership and strong alignment with the chair. And that alignment and partnership, that alignment really needs to be alignment with regard to the vision for the department and the program, aligned on the goals for the program, both short and long term, and understanding of what between the two of you is going to define success for the program. What are those metrics? What does that look like? And a shared perspective of really what's the desired culture of the program that you really want to establish. That alignment and partnership are critical for a number of reasons, which we'll talk about on these next few slides. It's not just to make your chair happy, honestly. It's not just because he or she wants to be right or in charge. It actually reflects well on how well you're going to get resources and how well your department and the program is going to achieve its goals. So let's just jump right into that. And there we go. So I'm from what some of us here call the upper left-hand corner of the state, which is the University of Washington, Seattle. And we're big rowers. So I picked this slide to talk about alignment. I don't know if you've read The Boys in the Boats, but rowing here is huge. So alignment with regard to the mission, vision, goals of the department and the institution is critical for the success of any program. It is absolutely what facilitates teamwork. Without alignment, you will not have a well-functioning, high-functioning team. You know that from your work in the emergency department for sure. If you're not all aligned on what the goal for that patient is, or the goal for that night in a setting of limited resources, you're not going to get to where you need to be. And if we are not aligned together amongst the leadership, we're not going to be able to communicate our goals effectively to our team. We need to all be rowing in the same direction, and that means we really need to have clarity on that mission, the vision, and our goals. And that alignment is what actually allows every single person in the department, all of the faculty, to see the importance of their own role and how they can contribute and their purpose, which gives them fulfillment and sustainability. So you all have to be aligned and clearly communicate on the mission, vision, and goals. Now, so what if we've just said that, alignment facilitates this great teamwork. It allows everybody to feel a part of the team, know how they can contribute, make their life, their role, their job meaningful. So what happens if you don't have alignment? Well, lack of that alignment really creates quite a bit of confusion. And really, again, it's not going to let us achieve the goal. So if we aren't aligned, if you are not communicating as you and the chair are not communicating together, this is really, you're going to get more something like this. People are going to, your faculty will be looking around. They won't be sure as to how they can contribute, how they can make a meaningful contribution, and what they should be doing next. And they will very quickly become confused as well as frustrated. So the worst thing that can happen is if that continues, they also ultimately will become disengaged. And I guarantee you what you will find is that when people do become disengaged, you're less productive, but you'll lose some really good people. And you'll have faculty there who they may stay, but they're not working up to their potential. They're not happy. So again, the alignment is really critical, just even internally for the well-being of your department. The other reason that alignment is so important is that we all have limited resources. I'm sorry, I don't know why. Is because of the limited resources that we have. You all know, in particular now after the COVID pandemic, but even before, our departments certainly don't have unlimited resources, right? Right now they're severely limited. And that applies not just to time, not just to money, but also to time. We are all being pulled in 5 million different directions. So time, money, and then the third thing is space is very limited. So how do you figure out where to delegate, where you're going to deploy your financial resources, your human resources, your space resources? If you don't have clarity on the mission, the vision, the values, the next steps, and the goals, both short-term and long-term, you're not going to be able to deploy those in a strategic way that allows you to reach those goals. So you really need to set the mission, the vision, the values. Everybody has a clear understanding of that, and that allows you to fairly distribute those resources, effectively, efficiently distribute them in a way that allow you to achieve those goals. An example, you're the chair of the department, you've got some additional funding somehow that year, and you thought, I'd really like to take this funding and put it towards, we've had a couple goals, and I want to put it towards a piece of capital equipment. And your program director says, you know what, I think you as a program director had requested that the funds go towards purchasing, say, a high fidelity simulator. The ultrasound team, on the other hand, had identified previously a need for a new ultrasound machine for both resident teaching as well as clinical use. How are you going to decide that? You can't buy both. You can't make both teams happy. But if they all have the same vision, the same goal, they understand the goals, then you can make that decision in a manner that all of the faculty can support and embrace that decision. And these are the types of decisions that you as a program director are going to have to make, and the chair, and they need to be made in concert and together with an understanding. The other reason that it's so important to be aligned is you want to facilitate your own success as a program director here. So you need to really totally understand, completely understand what the department's goals are and what pressures the chair may be under, as well as the institutional goals, what pressures the GME office are under, the dean of the medical school are under. Believe me, we have many taskmasters, as do you. I'm sorry about that. Let me turn that off. I thought I turned it off, but we have many taskmasters, and part of your role is actually to help us meet those goals and meet those taskmasters, because that's what makes our department successful, which is what will make the program successful. So really understanding what pressures your chair is under and being aligned will help you be successful. And the way to do that is if you understand what the goals and what the challenges for the program are, when you have a great idea, maybe for a high fidelity simulator or for something else that requires some sort of resources, you develop that protocol, you develop that policy or that proposal in a manner that actually supports those other goals, and illustrate how your proposal and how that product or whatever you're asking for will actually facilitate those goals. So again, this is the win-win. What you want, what they want, that's the win-win. And believe me, Lance, you can speak to this, I'm sure. And I'll turn it over to you if you want to add anything here. That is the only way to obtain resources for your department. And I'm sure you've experienced that.
Yeah, I just think this issue on alignment and being aligned with the chair so that you're not kind of moving in maybe different directions. It's really easy to have that happen. And that is just so important for really getting anything, particularly if it's new, if it's novel, because most things are going to take some resources. There's probably somebody who's going to have to prove something. And without just really tight alignment, it just makes it so hard. And I just agree with everything you've said, Sue.
So another thing is I put this up there is, while you need to really understand, you need to be able to see the forest for the trees. We're going to talk a little bit about your advocacy. Obviously, one of the really important things that you are as a program director, you guys know this, is you are an advocate for that program. And all chairs, I as a chair, I'm sure all chairs really want you to strongly advocate for the program. But you need to do it in a way where you will also need to have an awareness of the department goals and challenges, and this goes to alignment, and really see the forest from the trees. I have seen, not just program directors, but others, you tend to have, we have like 4 sections in our department. And, the ultrasound folks and the population folks and critical care and what's the 4th one? EMS, they all see their own departments, their own sections, and are all advocating for their own sections. And the PD is advocating for his or her residency program, and the leader of the medical student clerkship is advocating for that. So there's a lot of pressures, everybody wants something for their program and is advocating for the program. And that's a really good thing. But you need that leadership, including the program director, to be able to come outside of their world and really look at the other departmental goals and challenges. And that's going to be critical for you as a program director to maintain your credibility and to keep thriving relationships with all of the faculty in the department, which is critical for your success. So you need to really understand what are the challenges of the operations team. You need to understand what are the challenges again from the research team in the ED. You need to realize that while all the faculty may be aligned with regard to the departmental goals, these goals are broad and they're not just focused on the residency program. They can't be, because we have a mission that is broad. And so there are times, and you have to understand that there are times when some of those interests and issues, other ones, may be prioritized over a residency program. And if you are perceived by faculty as having an inability to see those other issues beyond the residency program, you will lose your ability to advocate and to move the interests of the program forward. I don't know if, Lance, you've observed that. And again, it's not just as a program director, other leaders in the department as well.
Yeah, and sometimes honestly, it's hard. I mean, I think we all, we've all mostly gone through this pandemic, and let's face it, we asked residents to do some things that were difficult and were maybe not like strictly in the educational curriculum, the ideal curriculum to cover some places. And, we pulled residents and they got sent, and they were like the highest trained person in the ICU that they ended up in for weeks and months. And, so clearly, and I believe that it made a huge difference, but we were only successful because we were so aligned that a good PD has to absolutely understand when there are just these other interests that you have to go after together.
Yeah. And I can give you examples as a chair, when I'm in discussions with other chairs and the deans, and we're talking about how are we going to use some funding. If I come to the table and it's always only about emergency medicine, I quickly lose credibility and my ability to advocate for anything for our department. So it's really this is true of anybody in a leadership position. You need to be an advocate, but you really need to be able to see the big picture and the perspective. And it's part of being a team player, and which is sort of what we're going to talk about in the next couple of slides as well. So the next thing I'm going to talk a little bit about is your representation. Now, you guys all know that you are, you know, it's important that you as the program director function as a representative, not just to the department within the institution, but even outside the institution, whether it's for SAM or CORD or ASEP or whatever it is. And in so doing, you are really the ambassador for the program. Your ambassador, and as part of that, you also want to be somebody who is effectively communicating what our needs are, what our alignment is, what our mission, vision, and our goals are. So, and if you can't do that within the institution, for example, where you are going to be seeking, and you and your chair together often are seeking resources to support the program, it's going to be really hard to attain those resources. You can't give mixed messages. So, for example, if your institution, you're at the University of Sunshine, and that medical school, they've come into some money as well, and they put out an RFP, a request for a proposal, for maybe sharing capital equipment that will further both the educational and the clinical mission of the institution, or maybe it's a grant. And they're really looking to see that it really spreads across disciplines. And and you as the chair have been in meetings with the dean or with the CEO of the hospital saying, you know, we really need an ultrasound machine because, you know, we can deliver better care that way. I need it for education. We may even improve the revenue, which will bring in more funding for these, for, you know, various programs, et cetera. And yet you as the program director have been in discussions, separate discussions, saying how you really need, you think that the institution should support a high fidelity simulator, going back to the previous example. And you're giving these mixed messages, the hospital is going to be a little bit confused as to what your priorities are. So that then creates confusion in the hospital. It leaves the impression that the department is not well aligned, that there's confusion between the leadership. It really doesn't reflect well on the team. So really you need to make sure you're aligned if you're going to get those resources. And that's really most of what I want to say with regard to representation. I think, I don't know, Lance, whether you want to add anything to that?
No, why don't we move along a little bit so we can definitely have time for some questions here. And let's talk about this issue on clarity, the consistency, and the communication, because you know, we've talked about how important alignment is, but these are also really, really important things that we just have to keep reinforcing, that remember, you know, you are a role model, you know, you are out there, people are actually watching you, okay? And you know, you have to help manage these resident expectations, and you have to balance the institutional kinds of, if you will, the constraints that may be budgetary constraints. And so communicating about what the mission and the vision of the program is, what the future of the program is, those faculty and resident expectations, and being clear and having it be the same message all the time is another, I think, really important message. Go ahead, Sue.
So yeah, so another important part is, again, I talked a little bit about representation already, but you are also a relationship builder, or what I like to say is a cultivator of relationships. As an advocate, if you're going to be effective, and I alluded to this, to be an effective advocate, you also need to cultivate some really important relationships across the institution. It's not just about representation, it's also about really developing those collaborative relationships. And I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about that. And those include with other PDs, and I know you know this, I'm sure you already do this, the DIO, medical school leadership, the GME office. And it's really important for you to actually start establishing those relationships and start those collaborations as soon as you get into your position as the PD. I'm assuming, I don't know who's on this webinar, but I'm assuming you've already done much of that. But the importance of that, we'll talk about in the next several slides, but the bottom line is you don't want to meet those stakeholders and decision makers for the first time when you're in a tough negotiation, you're asking for resources, or you're dealing with a controversial issue. Bill Richardson said this, Secretary of State, but he was talking about his relationship with North Korea, actually. He said, it's important that when you negotiate, you connect personally. You don't negotiate by sending emails or letters. It's person-to-person diplomacy. And I can't emphasize that more strongly. So again, why is that important? Well, first of all, building those relationships, you need it, but when you go into negotiations, et cetera, you need to engender trust. By doing so, you reduce any skepticism that you may receive and defensiveness, whether it's about a controversial issue or an issue that requires resources. It reduces perception of risk to the other individual because they've already seen that you're a team player, that you've developed this relationship with them, you've worked together. And it allows, in a controversial situation, allows the parties to focus on the issue at hand versus focusing on the people. So a little bit more specifically, in the circumstances when you're asking for resources, particularly big ones, again, if you've already joined the party, you've already, you became program director. One of the things I did as a chair, when I became chair and took my leadership position here, is I went around and met with all the chairs, and I actually met with the program directors as well, because we didn't have a program and we were going to build the program. And I wanted to alleviate I wanted to build trust. I wanted to alleviate any distress people might have of having a new department present. And so I started doing that. You need to engage early in committees if you haven't already done so. Show them that you're going to contribute to the organization, so that again, when you come to the table, people know, wow, this is a person that's a team player. They've contributed, they value the institution, and they wouldn't be asking if this wasn't a real need. And again, you don't want to do that when you don't want to do that when you don't want to just start beginning those relationships the first time when you're asking for a large sum of money or other resources, space, whatever it is. The other reason is around controversy. You are going to have some difficult conversations with other program directors and other leaders in the institution. It makes it a lot easier to focus on the problem and not the people when you already know them. You want to come to that discussion and make it a shared problem, negotiate, get everybody on the same page, and get them to want to address the problem together. It is, there's sometimes it is about the people, but we also know many times it's about the circumstances and other things. So you want to address the issues, and the best way to do that is if you've already developed these relationships. Jess Wald-Sellecuse from Harvard said, positive relationships are important not because they engender warm, fuzzy feelings, but because they engender trust. And that's a vital means of securing any outcome that you want. So really important there. Let me just go to the next slide here. And this is other thing is, we are all, and the residents and trainees who are coming out are all very electronically engaged. We live in a world of electronic communication. I just want to say you cannot form a bond with a few friendly emails. You got to make it's best if it can be in person. The past 18 months have shown, I think, that we can build relationships. I would argue probably not as effectively on Zoom, but it's certainly better than email. And so I would just remind you of that. And there was a study by a woman by the name of Nadler at Northwestern University in the School of Law. And they looked at negotiators they set up a study, and they spent 5 minutes chatting on the phone or 5 minutes not chatting on the phone without discussing any issue related to an upcoming negotiation. And in the end, they found that those who had taken even 5 minutes felt like the negotiation, the counterparts were much more cooperative during the discussion, shared more information, they made fewer threats, and as opposed to those who just did this through email. So again, I would encourage you to really focus on developing some of these relationships. They're really important. Do that early. I already said this. With engagement and participation comes credibility at the negotiating table. You'll be seen as a team player, as part of the team or inner circle. You'll be trusted, and your voice is going to be much more likely to be heard. So absolutely do that early on. Lance?
So remember that in addition to all the other things that we put on your plate, you know, you're going to be a teacher and a role model. And, you know, it's very important, you know, you're the face of the program. You're the face of the residency. Everything you do is being watched. Don't think for one moment that you like are private when you're, you know, the difference between sort of being on stage and off stage. You are mostly on stage all the time. And that includes if you take the residents out to a tavern after a shift. It includes when you go to a conference. It includes literally all the things that you do. And so that role modeling is so important. And you know, you just have to lead by example. It's so important that, you know, residents will respect you so much when you do this. And if you don't, they're gonna, you know, it'll diminish the respect they hold. So you just have to keep after it and get feedback on it. How are you doing in terms of that? And it's really an important part of what a PD needs to do, at least in my opinion. Next.
Dr. VUCA.
Well, thank goodness. That's me. For just it's sort of an inside joke at Northwell that there was I was scheduled to actually give a lecture on resuscitation, and there was a big event that took place in the world. And many of the residents were really upset. Some of them didn't want to come that morning. And so instead, I decided to give a lecture on VUCA. And this is the term of the military for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's sort of the world we're in now. I mean, we now live in the VUCA world. And we really do. You just see it all around us. You see it you just pick up a newspaper and read the front page and you go VUCA, VUCA, VUCA. And we don't expect that it's going to get suddenly like go back to the way it was in the 80s or something like that. We are not going to go back. And so, Sue, if you can just advance.
Yep.
So as you think about this, what you really want to do is sort of take that volatility and turn it into vision. You know, that's what so many people are looking for. One of the most important things that I heard from one of my mentors is that, you know, people want to be led, but they want to be heard, but people want to be led. They're looking for your vision. Next. Turn that uncertainty into understanding. You know, use the uncertainty to shine some light on it, dig into these issues, you know, talk about what is making things feel uncertain, about what the job market is going to be like in emergency medicine in the coming years. Shine light into that, because then people will gain understanding. In terms of complexity, see where you can provide a little bit of clarity in that complexity. And it's not that every complex thing can be made clear, but certainly you'll find elements that you can clarify. And the ambiguity, attempt to turn that into agility in your organization. Do new things, try new things out. Don't be afraid to innovate. That is one of the things in this VUCA world that it always sort of wins out. You know, innovation is great. And sometimes we tend to get a little bit stuck, a little bit calcified, you know, lectures should all be an hour. Well, not anymore. Okay. You know, they have to be face-to-face. Well, with Zoom, we had to be agile. And so I think that thinking of the world, and I also think young people, you know, I may be wrong. I don't know if there are any on the line, and if they are offended, they can feel free to say so. But I think the young people I talk to, they are very aware that the world is an uncertain, shifting set of sands right now. And what is it going to be like? And they're anxious about it, as anyone would be. And, you know, I have a daughter and son who fit right into this age group. And so these are just important issues that you as the PD have to have the ability to really add something to the game here.
Yeah, I think Lance, this is a really important part of leadership in this day and age. We're just no longer in a world that's I don't know if the world was ever simple, but I don't know that it's ever been as complex and as you said, like shifting sands as right now. And so learning how to provide vision so that people are not, you know, instead of your team members feeling volatility and uneasy, they know that you have them on a track. There's a vision, we're going to get there. You've provided them an understanding of the world. You've provided them the clarity, and then you build your team so that they can be agile. So I couldn't agree with you more. This slide really just lists some, you know, we could spend an entire year talking about effective leadership. There are books and books and books and libraries written on it. People focus their entire career on how to be an effective leader, different, whether you're a transformative or servant leader or a, you know, empathetic leader or whatever it is. So we have this slide here just to really, you know, it sort of complements the VUCA concept of leadership, and just provides you with sort of things to think about in a way. And again, it goes back to some of the things that we've already articulated, but really you as a program director, we are looking to you to really, again, consistently and clearly, often, frequently articulate the mission, the vision, and the goals so people keep that in mind. We are looking for you to provide that in this VUCA world, that steadiness and that direction to the team and to the residents, to reassure them, and to really, again, cultivate that emotional steadiness. So that means that you need to be emotionally steady. You need to sometimes step back, check yourself and say, oh, is this something I need to get upset about right now or no? And what's the most constructive and productive way of addressing this? We look to you to bring out the best in your team and develop your team members, help them innovate, which will help them be agile. Again, the last couple of things on this slide, again, making those sort of difficult decisions and providing, sometimes making sure that you're communicating those. It's hard to be a leader. You have to be courageous. And so we're looking to you in that role as well. We also want you to ensure the health of the team and promote resiliency amongst yourselves, because it's hard as a leader. You're often going to feel isolated. Know that you always have your chair. You shouldn't feel isolated. You are a partner with your chair. And so your resiliency is important, as well as your teams. Lance, I don't know if you want to, if there's 2 or 3 of these that you think are most important, or what you might say about this.
Yeah, I think that preserving morale, when particularly as things are tough, you know, bringing out the best in every resident, and reassuring people so that in times of VUCA, you know, they kind of feel safe and supported. You know, those are such important things.
Yeah. And again, your chair is always there for you. So remember that. Let's go on to the next one. This is fiscal responsibility. Well, you know, you asked us what we think is going to make a successful program director. We would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about fiscal responsibility. Not any of our favorite thing, but it's really important that we understand principles of good budgeting and budgetary limitations. You should set and follow fiscal and budgetary policy, and be willing to make decisions where you have to prioritize. You got to work with your chair to also, it'd be helpful if you work with your chair to identify new sources of funding, whatever that may be. That's always helpful. But also go to your chair with reasonable asks. You know, I don't mind anybody coming in and asking for things, but if you already know that this is an impossible ask, you're better off. It's going to reflect better on you and your team if you, make it more reasonable and come to the table with a clear understanding of what limitations are in the department. I don't know if you Lance, you want to say anything about this, but
Yeah, I mean, you know, you've said it really well, but you know, it's like, look, you know, we all wish we had more money. Okay, it's just like, wouldn't it be great? But you may have to make some tough calls, and your chair may have to make some tough calls, and then you have to back it up. And so, you know, those are going to be important things that you do, even if you're like, gosh, I had really wanted to do that. You know, you might have to put that off. There's a lot of things, to be honest, that chairs want to do, and we make decisions, and you have to be able to both live with that, support it, and sometimes really help out with it. Come in with an alternative thing to do that doesn't cost so much money.
yeah. It's really about being strategic, right? And strategic in how you plan, you know, for this year and for next year and the years after, and also strategic in your ask. And that's part of being a good negotiator. I'm not trying to, you know, it's not that we're trying to do anything under the table or dishonest, but you need to think about that. And then one of the less fun things, again, Lance, we'll talk about this.
Well, you know, whether you like it or not, you know, you also have to be at times a disciplinarian. And, you know, one of my friends who Sue knows really well is a CMO at a fairly big place, you know, and he says, look, I spend 80% of my time with this small group of people. And what really happens is he's having to discipline people, and you will have to do that. And you have to be sort of comfortable with that. You have to be fair. You got to follow all the HR rules. You've got to understand that you're there to be the program director, not their friend of the residents. So, you know, that doesn't mean that you cannot be very close with them and be really engaged with them, but you're not there to be their friend. And so you have to be able to bring anybody in and have a difficult conversation with them.
Yeah. So you're a coach, largely you're a coach, but there are some people where you tried to coach them and you can't get them there. And at that point, you have to sort of shift your focus. One of the other things that we skipped a couple slides here, but you also need to, again, less fun, is you need to be an effective administrator. I don't know, Lance, whether you want me to talk about this or you want to talk about it.
Go ahead. Just say a few words.
Okay. So, you know, the fun part of being a program director is creating the curriculum, advancing the people around you, watching them progress, coaching them, things like that. But unfortunately, there's that part of the job that isn't so fun. And that is being that administrator, having that attention to detail, whether it's the RRC rules or whatever it is. So you really need to develop knowledge and policy, knowledge about policy and regulations, both internal and external, whether they're HR rules or the RRC stuff or something specific to your Department of GME. And you need to be, and you need to know those. You need to be responsive to institutional requests. So if the dean's office or the GME office or DIO are sending you questions, you need to answer those pretty quickly, because again, this is another way you're representing the emergency department, you're representing your department. So being responsive to those is really important. I'd also say being data-driven is an important part of being an effective administrator. So again, it goes back to knowing your budget, knowing your data about your residents, knowing the data around what conferences are working and what isn't working. If you want to make policy or program changes, you really do need to understand the data. And being somebody who's always focused on continuous process improvement for the educational program, and even for the administrative tasks, so that you can make your team, the APDs, your program coordinators, et cetera, making all of them more effective. So I liked this cartoon because the more effective you are as an administrator, the more efficient you are. If you can build those skills for yourself, you're going to build them for the team, and then you will have time to do things like, you know, reading a book about time management or reading a book about developing yourself and doing those other things. So not the fun part of your job, but a really important part of your job. As a chair, you don't want to be the one that's called out because you haven't submitted your annual review report or whatever it is. Doesn't reflect well. And then the next one is, we talked about this. Lance and I sort of had a nice discussion on this. You need to know the chairs do not like surprises. Lance, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I think that's just a really good rule for anybody in a job with a boss. Like, no surprises, like doesn't reflect well. Just talk to the chair, the good, the bad, the ugly. It doesn't matter what it is. Like you have to be able to tell the chair if there's an issue that's going on. And of course you can come in with a solution, but just don't delay letting your chair know about it. And, like I know of situations with other chairs and so forth, where they just really felt almost sandbagged over an issue, oh, why is that resident, such and such, and you didn't tell me. Those are things, do not make that mistake.
Yeah, it doesn't reflect well on the department at all. It really makes the department look, not connected with each other. And I would say that even about the good things. So somebody in your department, one of your residents gets some top-notch award, or the program does, that's not an institutional award, or because you'll likely know about that, maybe. Let your chair know. You don't want to be walking down the hall and have the dean say, hey, so-and-so, got an award, congratulations. And you're like, you can't say anything about it. So it's really, and it also gives the chair the opportunity to advertise that to the other departments. And
so just on that, and the other thing is basically, look, we're all human, and for the most part, your chair and me, like, I don't want to look any more stupid than I actually am. Okay. And so the problem is that on an emotional level, if your chair gets surprised by the dean who says something, it sort of makes me feel stupid. Okay. And so you don't want to put your chair in that emotional state.
Yeah, I already feel stupid most days, and that's exactly right. You want to make it, you want to work together to make each other and your department look good. That really gets the vibe to it. This is, a fun part of your job. Go ahead, Lance.
I would just say that this is like absolutely the fun part, and you do have to just love every resident, and they're sort of like children, and that warmth and that caring, you have to care for them, you have to care about them. And to be honest, that's one of the things that is the most important to me, and all of the PDs, APDs is collectively, they have to care for every single resident. And sometimes, I'm going to be really honest, sometimes it's hard to care for a particular resident. And by God, I have to know that the PD and the program directors are going to care for that resident.
Yeah. And I think Lance already spoke about this.
Yeah.
Again, it just goes to, just as you got to care for everybody equally, you've got to also manage some of the difficult behaviors equally as well. And as a career counselor and advocate, Lance, do you want to talk about this? Because
fine.
Talk about now how important it is.
Right about now, the job market is tough. You got to help the birds get out of the nest. Okay. And they're going to fly away. And that's why we train them. We want them to be happy and have a nice set of wings, and so you should insist that and work with your chair or work with your whole faculty to get them, what they need as they begin to leave the program. And that's another very important part of, in my opinion, being a good PD, is making sure that everybody flies out of the nest and is relatively happy.
Yeah. That's what we do, right? We want to make people great physicians, but really happy in their roles, whatever it is going to be for them, meeting their aspirations. So this isn't all on you. You should be, again, as Lance said, working with your chair, but, other faculty can engage in this as well. But that coaching, that career preparation, ahead of time is really important. So it's not just about learning emergency medicine, it's really helping to, you're a career counselor, and that should start early on in the residency program, but really accelerates towards the end. And again, now, we're in some challenging times now with regard to the job market, but really important.
Good.
And I think that's all we have. So love to hear some.
Floor is
chat.
open.
So while people are getting their questions together, I do have a couple that have come up. How do you get buy-in from the chair to get recognition and value on education contributions as opposed to research and clinical billing things?
So really quick, I mean, I think what you want to do is you want to be sure that every department has its own, I'll say, awards for education, the kinds of recognition for education. It should be in the newsletter. It should be, you talk about it, and you just have to keep running it up the flagpole. And if you're in a, I would love to know like where you're from, that like all the recognition goes to the researchers, because there aren't too many places in emergency medicine that I think are really built like that. But there are a few places that at least talk about that. But if you feel like that's a little bit out of balance in the department, then that's like a serious discussion that you should be having, like with the faculty, with the other people in the department. I think realistically, the issue that most of us face is that most of our departments are now so heavily, if you will, operationally oriented towards flow, that many times some of the emphasis on education is difficult, and I think that's something that we all face. Sue, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that it's, it is, we've got a mission that's clinical care, education, and research, and it needs to be promoted up there, just like the research and obviously the clinical care. And I think identifying platforms and mechanisms for recognition are really important. So if you have a newsletter, making sure that there are announcements in the newsletter about lectures that are being given, awards, and implementing awards. We have several awards that are focused towards education. In fact, we have more educational awards in our department than any other award.
Yeah. Teacher of the year, there's
all those things,
like all of those things. And most residencies have those. If yours doesn't, start it. They're wonderful.
Yeah. And if people are feeling disenfranchised or marginalized or not valued, I think that is having a balanced discussion with your chair on that is really important. That's a discussion you need to absolutely have with the chair. And I would assume that your chair would want to know that and would want to engage some other faculty to identify other mechanisms of recognition.
So you discussed being in alignment and having good communication. Obviously, in a good situation, that's exactly what happens, but sometimes things get off track. So if you fall out of alignment, what can the PD do to kind of realign things when perhaps the chair is disagreeing with something that they feel is pretty basic?
So, I mean, I guess what I would say is it really comes down to good communication, regular ongoing communication, frequent communication between the chair and the program director, hopefully to prevent that. But in the case that there is lack of alignment, I think there needs to be just a discussion. And if you're, the program director needs to be able to articulate if they disagree, why, right, in a reasonable manner, again, and why the need to shift to whatever the program director sees as a need, right? Help the chair understand what those needs are or what the concerns are, because the chair may not understand that. Similarly, the program director needs to come to the table and try and understand it's about understanding each other's perspective and what the other pressures are on the chair that may be driving the alignment apart. Because usually that's what it's about. It's about one or the other individual not really seeing what's going on in the other's space. Us not appreciating something about a new RRC regulation, or not knowing that the residents are really unhappy about something, versus, and maybe the program director not understanding some of the budgetary issues or some of the other issues that, you know, the other issues that are impacting the chair's ability to support the department, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, Lance, what do you think?
And I'd say bring in colleagues too.
Yeah.
Don't, how shall I say, don't carry the coffin by yourself.
Yeah.
Just share it, that thing, and bring colleagues in. You'll get so many different perspectives. And you might hear a new perspective, and the chair will be, I think, very responsive to having several people come to them with a concern or something. Oh, we think there's a lack of alignment here. Could we become more aligned, And so I'd say reach out. Don't carry that burden by yourself.
Another great question actually from the group is, in terms of recruiting, obviously a huge portion of the PD's job is recruitment. How much as chairs do you think you either should or want to be involved in that activity? With the understanding that a bunch of these people who are getting recruited into residency may well stay at your institution as attendings on the other side of it. But it's a lot. Also, it's also a lot of work because, certainly in our place, we're interviewing 3 sessions a week at this point for the next however many weeks.
Sue, do you want to start? I've got a
Sure. So I'm probably an outlier in the sense that I'm pretty involved as the chair. I like to meet the candidates for a couple of reasons. I don't get to meet them all, but I give a short spiel at the beginning, and then I interview probably 50% of them, not based on, the PD interviews all of them, right? But, I just interview probably about 50% of them for the day. But I like to get to know them for a couple of reasons. One, I learn about what other programs and in particular medical schools are doing with their students. And that can be helpful because then we can potentially bring some of those things to our students. So that's kind of fun. It's energizing for me. I love meeting them. And I started this partly because where I was, our chair was pretty involved, but also because when I came, we were a new program and there was skepticism. And I thought it was really important that they see we are engaged and the residency program is so prioritized that the chair is going to be there and that, we're really engaged in their development. Because when you're starting a new program, there's skepticism about whether, should we go to that program or not? And then that's just sort of, I've stuck. So I like to be involved, but I don't think you have to be involved as a chair. You just need to make sure that the most important thing is that when the candidates are coming, they are seeing a commitment from the department. They get a good understanding what the curriculum's like. They get a good sense of the fit of the program for them. And that there are, for you as the chair, that there are trusted people interviewing, that our goals are the same and aligned with regard to the types of candidates we want and the culture of the program we want to build. And that's being communicated to them. I find it energizing, but takes a lot of time.
So I probably spend less time than Susan does doing it, in part because I came into 2 very mature programs where they didn't expect me to have anything to do with it whatsoever. And so I definitely try to do intro anytime that I'm around, because I want to say hello to them and welcome them and so forth. I don't interview, and there are a few reasons for that. But one of the other things is I actually don't put my finger in any way on the list, the match list. Okay. In part because I don't feel like that I do it well enough, that I have enough time that I've spent to meet every candidate to feel like my evaluation of a candidate should carry weight. And I'm afraid of what it would do to the process if the chair came in and started to play around with the list. I'm afraid that there might be other people who would have less of a voice, if you will. And there is actually another reason too, which is that I interface with like all the VIPs and the board of trustees who have children and nieces and nephews, and they have this and they have that, and they have friends, and they have their best friend who like has this person, and I'm just, look, I'm in New York. People want favors in New York. Okay. Like that's just the way it is. I learned that. I'm a Midwesterner, so I wasn't used to that, but trust me, in New York, people want favors, And so it is also a protection to me as the chair that I can absolutely look anyone in the face. And Marianne, this, like, I don't even look at the list. Okay. So and the one thing I do is I'll sit with Marianne or with Tom. And I'll say, look, what do you want me to do? If you want me to do something, I will step up and do almost anything. And so it's a back and forth negotiation. What does the program need at that point? What are the things that we want to do? Tom knows that the list is his baby. Okay. And the program directors all know that's their baby. I'm expecting them to do a great list. And of course, I'm also going to hold them responsible for how we do. So if I get myself too involved in that, it's sort of, I lose my ability to be as objective about it, I suppose. So that's kind of my approach to it. And my guess is everyone does it a little bit differently. And so I think that the important thing is for a program director, really have a good talk with your chair. What does your chair want to do? What do they not want to do? Okay, where do they? But I do think that on some level, the program and the program director deserves a little bit of autonomy in terms of decision making. And so, those are my feelings.
So I do feel like my home state just got slurred a little bit, and everybody needs favors. But one last question actually kind of links in very nicely to that, which is what do you identify as a successful program director? What metrics do you use? What makes someone successful at this job?
What metrics, not what characteristics?
I could go either way on this question. Why don't we do a metric and a characteristic, I guess?
Well,
I'll jump in on metrics, which
Okay.
is that there's that, and I sit down with the program director regularly, and we say, look, what are the metrics that we're really looking for in the program? Is it scores on tests? Is it diversity of our applicants? Is it diversity of the people that we recruit? Is it the way the program is held in esteem? Is it national reputation? Is it the number of abstracts that get turned into SAM by people? There are all kinds of these metrics. And what we try to do is in a general way, have a relative agreement on those things. I think the most important thing is to pick the ones that you feel are most relevant to the program for where you are right now. And I feel like sometimes it's different when a program is just beginning than when it's more mature, when it's in between. And so I encourage an active search for good metrics. And the important thing that I want to see as the chair is I don't really care so much where things start. I want to see things improve year by year, right? I want to see them get better. And I'm not going to hold a PD responsible for where it was when we started, but a couple years into it, I'm expecting to see advancement in areas.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think I would say that, I don't know that there's any one metric, partly because the programs across the country are so different. The resources that they have are different. And the expectations even from the dean's office. I mean, there's some more academic programs that are in really academic powerhouses, and then there are less academic programs. And so I think you need to look at what your goals are and then set the metrics based on those goals. And are things, again, as Lance said, are things improving? Are you meeting your goals? There are going to be some obvious goals, as you want your residents to be happy and fulfilled and be graduating and getting good positions and getting and you want your program's reputation to be that of graduating great residents who are well trained, et cetera. And then, so those are some musts, right? You want to make sure, there are some obvious things. If you're not filling in the match, like year over year, I mean, there are times where, things happen, right? But if it's a pattern, then that's a problem. But otherwise, and that's generally doesn't happen, but otherwise, I think it's, you've set these goals for what you define as success for your program. You've agreed on them. Are you marching towards them in a constructive way? Which is, so it's not unlike the success of any other leader in your department, or the other section or division in your department. I think that's how you define success. But you've got to agree on it ahead of time is the key there.
I'm going to follow up with your question, Dr. Stern, and what are the characteristics of a successful program director?
Well, I think we tried to talk about that.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's going to be, so first of all, they have to be committed to the job and passionate about the job, really engaged with the residents, nurture the residents. They also need to be able to develop, at the same time that they need to be a passionate educator, they need to do all those other things as a leader, right? And, I don't think you can be an effective program director anymore. Maybe 30 years ago you could, but there's so much administrative stuff, and the world we live in as departments of emergency medicine are complex, and there's so many pressures that you really have to be able to lead well and be able to see the big picture and partner with the rest of the institution and the rest of the department. I mean, that's really how I feel. And I'll give you an example. And I don't want anyone to take this in the wrong way, but many times you interview candidates for jobs and they say, well, for example, you ask them what their career goals are and they say, I want to go into medical education. And you ask them, well, what does that mean to you? What does that position look like? And sometimes they'll say, well, that means I want to be a clerkship director. But many times they say, ultimately, I really want to be a program director. And I will say to them, I think that's a great goal. So you want to be a program director, but that's actually an administrator. You need to be a good medical educator, right? But you also need to be, that's an administrative role at this point. You can, so you need to be all of those great things as a program director, a great educator, a great teacher, nurturer, coach, mentor, understand curriculum development, all those things, but you've got to have the package of how to be a good administrator and a good leader. Lance?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to just pick one thing. You know what I mean? Maybe part of what is really important is I think you have to have this balance. You have to be able to shift from Mother Teresa to the Terminator. Do you know what I mean? Like knowing like, when are you Mother Teresa? We lift everyone up. And when are you, I'll be back, or something like that. Do you know because that's what's getting projected all the time. And to keep that balance, you're being fiscally responsible and at the same time innovative. Well, how am I supposed to be innovative when I have no money? Well, that's what we're expecting of you. I think that we live in this, world where there just are these conflicts. I want all the faculty to be really engaged with the residents, but they don't come to conference. But how do we work that balance out where we get the expectations of the rest of the faculty, and yet the program people are doing the things they need to do? What's the balance on all of the things? So I would say like having this like amazing balance is like a really important thing, knowing sort of which zone to veer into at given moments. When COVID hits, you wear one mask. when things are a little bit different for residency graduation, you get to wear a different mask, you know? And so I think being able to do that in an artful way is spectacular.